Hello. So, for the last few weeks, I've still just been going nuts making lots and 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 I don't actually know how many shots I did, but a lot of different shots for the Pete episode. I'm kind of going through adding this like veneer of new CG using the stuff I know how to do now on top of like basically a project I filmed 5 years ago. I think I've talked about that, and because Johnny Valencia is an incredible DP filming on like on Red in like 4K. This is going to be like my first 4K film that I've ever released, and it's a very silly film. But that means like the new CG doesn't feel too incongruous with like the old footage. It's actually gelling a lot better than I expected, and I've kind of just given myself free reign to do anything I want to the episode as long as I can do it in kind of like a day. If it's like, all right, if it's a day experiment, just do it, and however many days it is, that's how many days it is. It's much easier to think in terms of days than years, and as long as I don't do 365 shots, where it's still fine. But one thing I wanted to do, at one point the titular Pete is standing on the edge of a cliff and he meets a little robot guy, and this was actually all animated by my friend Nate Taylor. But the robot guy pulls out some knives and threatens him and guides him back to the camp where he meets the character of Rust Boy. And I've always loved this little floating robot guy. He's actually from the very first episode of Dynamo, like 11-12 years ago. Although I've updated the model once since then, but I should really do it again. But the idea was always that like they had a lot of different functions they could perform, and the way you knew which one they were performing was by the hat you put on their head. So that you put a construction hat on and they would be like working in construction. When we first meet the first one, he's wearing a detective hat. This one is wearing like a tricorner hat, and so he's like a buccaneer. I don't know if buccaneers wore tricorner hats. Yes, of course they did. And at one point, Pete's talking to the character played by EHENVAD012, who exclaims,
"Watch your step. Don't want to scare Rust Boy."
Is Rust Boy your little robot buddy?
No, Rust Boy's me.
And so I want to cut to the little floating robot at that moment, and I thought it'd be fun to have him like chopping vegetables for dinner, kind of, and just kind of like glance over, and kind of like a I don't know. It's fun when the mute kind of cute / violent baby Groot Gromit-esque character just kind of gets a moment, and so seeing that this like knife wielding robot also like cooks dinner, it's just I think it's just kind of fun. And so I was thinking it'd be fun to figure out how to make a little robot look as if it's chopping vegetables, and I did it, and it's pretty fun.
Rust Boy your little robot buddy?
No, Rust Boy's me.
But the video I made documenting the process was not fun. It was basically just ended up being a particle emitter shooting bits of vegetables out while a Boolean ate away at the vegetable, and except it took me like 40 minutes, and it's one of those things where I'm like, I could edit this down to be like a 1 minute like lazy tutorial. And so I don't know, if you want to watch food stuff, I recommend going back and watching the stir fry video. It covers a lot of the same ground better with a more interesting result. So instead, I want to go through some of those old shots, and ideally every time you're doing something, even if it's something you've done a lot before, you're still kind of learning little things. And so I want to list the thing I learned while making each shot, the little lessons that maybe kind of came up, and hopefully that's kind of interesting. So let's dive into that, and let's actually jump right in with this shot. I learned a few things with this, and also I want to show you just like this weird particle system I set up. I don't think my brain was totally on. Like all the particles are just disappearing, and the carrots that stick around end up having this perpetual motion blur on them, which I could probably fix by like baking or doing something, and this one's floating. It works as a joke shot, but it was not good for like, hey, this is how we can simulate vegetables. But one of the big things this shot really reiterated for me was the importance of microparticulate. It's a secondary particle system on top of the main one, where usually I'll just duplicate it and replace it with like tiny little droplets or grit or something, and I don't know how well it comes through in the compression, but I have all this little just spray coming, like bits of moisture and tiny things, and that's because particle systems tend to kind of look uniform. Even if you randomize the scale, it's still kind of like the same type of piece, and mixing in another just tiny little thing, whether it's the destruction of a wall or little things bursting or something, just tiny little bits popping around. It's computationally really lightweight, it's really fast to set up. These are just referencing a little like beveled cube with a glass material on it, and plugged into like the same particle system, and now there's these little kind of just splashes of moisture. And the other thing is when he's chopping, you can see he has this kind of quick vibration going, and for me that kind of actually sells the whole shot. And that's just a noise modifier on like the x-axis. I was able to copy that noise modifier and apply it to the hat offset. In fact, here, I'll show you real quick. Okay, so I have a master cube. I'm going to duplicate it for the hat, kind of bring it there, and I'll raise the center of gravity so it's just a little bit kind of more jaunty. And let's actually do another one, and this will be like a little flap or something just kind of sticking off the base. We'll keep the origin kind of right there. I'm going to parent both of these to the main cube, Control P. And now if I rotate this, hit I, add a rotation keyframe. I'm going to select the Y-axis here and open the secret side panel and add a noise modifier, which goes way too fast. I'm going to scale it up and turn the strength down. But now we have kind of just that rapid little rotation. I can click this button and copy this exact modifier. So now if I add a keyframe here, grab again the Y-axis, I can paste that right on there and they'll both do the same thing. And here, I'll zoom in. If I offset this by a couple frames, just scoot it to the right, now it's at a delay behind the main one. So it looks like the motion has been transferred into the other object. And I'll do the exact same. Actually, I think I can just copy this one and paste it on here too. And look at that, it's just an easy way to add kind of something that looks like it could be kind of a physics sim, but without actually having to do any of that. Just some offset noise modifiers. In this shot, I learned a lot of things. The big one was probably to be more careful when I'm using skies as a background, because you can see the values here. This looks like it should be blown out, like we're losing data there from the clipping, from it being overexposed, but because it's integrated in there with the volumetrics and stuff, it's actually losing some of the values, so it's blown out even though it's like dimmer value-wise than these foreground highlights, which just really makes it feel like it's a JPEG in the background, because it is. Whereas if I'd really let these values be as bright as they're supposed to be, it wouldn't feel as much like that. I learned again, normally if you're doing a photo scan, you don't want direct sunlight as part of the scan, because then that sunlight is baked into the scan, and if you have the sun coming from a different angle, like the lighting and the texture is fighting the real light. But I learned that if you do line it up with the sun in the scene, like right now in this has actual direct sunlight on it. This is a sun shadow, but since it's kind of lined up with the actual direction, this stuff actually feels fairly tactile, and so there's a little bit of fudge room there. I also learned that this smoke is a larger scale than I'd previously thought, and I learned how to get over myself and use Mixamo characters sometimes, because that's a website I have access to. I don't normally, just because the characters on Mixamo tend to be very specific, along with like the actions that you have that you can use. But in this case, since they were just small background characters, I was able to pick a character and an action and have them in the scene in like 20 minutes instead of doing my usual like photo scanning rigging route, which would take, probably a couple hours. I also learned that adding greebles onto a sword is kind of cool. It looks like it has like a little engine built into the blade or something like that. I like that. This shot is just an extension of a few different tutorials. Like this is just straight up the volumetrics tutorial. I'm going to be linking all of these below if you want to follow up on any of these and kind of get some more detail. And the ground is just an extension of the creating a shot from scavenged elements. It's just this bush element, the single bush element scattered across this flat plane. But I'm leaning really hard into the cutting to wide shot giving kind of an epic feeling, and keeping the bike nice and small does that too, especially in the context of the music. You just get that feeling of small man, big world off on an epic quest type thing, and I got that actually from one of my favorite movies, which is The Rescuers Down Under. And I'm going to link to this too, because it's one of my favorite sequences ever. But yeah, they spend like a couple minutes establishing this eagle is just enormous. Like, look how small he is, and like the wingspan doesn't even fit in the frame. This eagle is gargantuan. And then they cut to this shot where it's just this tiny little speck against this giant cloud. On VHS, that's literally just like the tiniest little smudge. And like the scale whiplash you get was, I don't know, it always really hit me. This entire scene is just like a masterclass in like making you feel excitement and stuff. And if you're watching it without the music, you are missing out, because the music is incredible. And I know I kind of harp on this sometimes, but you'll get YouTube comments where people are like, you know, story is the absolute most important thing. Everything should be in service of story. But I think story should be in service of experience, like the actual experience for the audience, because that's their actual takeaway, how they felt watching the thing. Because the story beat of the sequence is, and then Cody flies around with the eagle and has a wonderful time. But the experience is you actually feel as if you're befriending an eagle, and like, you know, you're jumping off a cliff and it's doing the whole thing. I'm gonna spend like my whole career just trying to recreate the way that this scene felt when I saw it when I was a kid. Anyway, sorry about that. I really love this sequence. Okay. In this shot, I wanted there to be this like sense of power as the can was about to hit the ground, and I wanted to borrow that kind of visual language of like the rocks kind of floating too, as if they're caught in its nexus of power, kind of all X-Men-y. But I was having trouble with that because I was like, all right, so do the rocks all just kind of like randomly lift up, and it all looked really uniform and stupid, and so I ended up adding a turbulence force field, which these things just kind of followed the low pressure patterns in that turbulence field. Can I show you? So I've got this particle system, and I have the ground as a collider object. Let's create a turbulence force field here. And I'm going to turn the strength and the size up to like 11. And now the turbulence will actually create these high and low pressure kind of areas. And you can see it just has these like natural vortices, and it'll actually lift the things up in the currents as long as like the gravity isn't too strong. And I always thought this would be so cool for like, here, if we change the scale, you can see right here, like it's a certain scale. We can make it like denser than that. But I thought this would be so fun to do for like flower petals, or like, you know, certain times in spring when there's pollen and stuff blowing around. Or if you turn up the flow a little bit, it'll actually cause the particles to like coalesce into those low pressure areas and form these tentacles, almost like it's like bugs following a road or something. But I just always thought this would be fun for like a magic spell or something like this. And you can combine it with other force fields too, like wind. So we could blow everything in a certain direction and just mix and match. Sometimes having a vortex going on can do some interesting things, although this is a little bit strong here. But yeah. Particle. This also works with rigid bodies stuff. Just turbulence. Very fun, easy way to animate stuff randomly, but with like certain impressions of order. Yeah, that's kind of cool. And also, let me just say, this shot would be vastly better if I'd included that microparticulate. Right now it's just picking up a bunch of like fairly uniform pieces of gravel. If I had like 10,000 little pieces of sand or whatever they're being caught in the current too, it would feel a lot more tangible. This shot mostly just drove home how straightforward everything can be as long as you don't overcomplicate it. It's a full digital cutaway that blends perfectly into the rest of like the live action footage. And barring, you know, the little pizza ball ad on here, I was able to just assemble this in like 40 minutes. The background here, this is just, you know, a JPEG of some wall paneling. The TV I had already made, and the eagles are actually CC0 from the Virtual Museums of Malopolska. And look at this. This scan is just absolutely incredible. And they've got a whole bunch of stuff uploaded. A lot of birds. Oh, I gotta get these new birds. Oh, I'm definitely gonna get these ones. But yeah, you combine some high quality photo scans with like scene accurate lighting or good HDRI or something like that, and it can just look realistic. The tools now are absolutely wild, and I just have to not like do anything too uncanny to throw it off. In the actual live action footage, we had a little bit of a smoke machine going to add some haze, and so I just added, you know, a touch of volumetrics to the digital set, and it all just matched. I didn't learn anything making the pizza ball, except that it's easier to make a pizza ball than I thought. No, so, you know, the pepperonis are just pepperoni that I cut out and put on it. And this is just a sphere that I kind of went, you know, project from view, and just stuck it on there, and it, again, worked easier than I thought. The dripping cheese effect was hand modeled in a very kind of silly way. Here, I'm just going to select a few of these random triangles off the bottom here, hit E, extrude them straight down, flatten it all out. Then I'm going to go to individual origins, extrude, scale it up, extrude it down, and then if I add a subdivision surface on there, it all kind of like just looks like melted cheese. And here I can hit Shift E to flatten out the base of all of that. But yeah, that's basically what I did. I also kind of like took a few of these, added some slightly larger drips, just kind of going straight down, which added a bit. But that was most of it. I was surprised by how well it worked. With the Wise Crab shot, I did one of my first ever dynamic hair sims, which ended up being easier than I thought, actually. Like, I knew it wasn't hard, but you just check plus let's add some hair and go hair dynamics, and then look at that, it's doing a thing. It did take forever for me to, like, you know, tweak all of the settings so it was moving the way that I wanted it to, and I probably could have rendered it out with like a few more render samples, but yeah, that worked okay. The big thing I learned was just how to make like 10,000 little crabs walk all over the landscape. You didn't even notice those, did you? No one ever will. They're just this little animated crab, kind of animated the same as like the moths, but these ones are constrained to the ground, and they kept exploding into the air, so at any given time there's just 20 crabs flying through the air, which wasn't great for the story, but may have been good for the audience experience. No, but I found out I just had to create like a low poly proxy version of the ground instead of like trying to actually have them walk on the detailed high res mesh of the photo scan, because that would just, you know, they would just explode sometimes. Oh, and also thank you to Felicia White for reworking the rig for the crab a little bit. Nate made a version of the crab, I updated the crab, Felicia updated my update, then I updated Felicia's update, so now Nate just has to do a final pass so the whole thing will be fully symmetrical. This shot just really reiterated how important it is to have practical lighting on set that you can use to match with your CG environment. And in this case, we didn't even know what the environment was going to look at. And Johnny just set up this orange LED bar. But that meant that I was able to add these curtains here and have it all just really integrate. And it feels a lot more like it all belongs together. And this curtain is kind of the most interesting part of the entire shot. If I'd done it the other way, where I'd created the environment first, then I would have, you know, set up the lights to try to match. But yeah, I love how that kind of feels. And it helped tie it together with this shot here too. I'm also continuing to always learn that I love draping plastic on stuff. Just feels so kind of textural and translucent, and it does cool stuff with light. And in the background here, this is just an IK chain. Maybe I'll share this model just because it's really like basic. It was animated, just it's solving to an endpoint, which I'm, you know, every 4 frames I'm adding another keyframe of it moving around. I was able to animate the entire thing like super quick during a conversation with Nathan because I am a horrible conversationalist sometimes. But yeah, a lot of times when people are shooting people on green screens, they forget that like that person is going to be in an actual scene, and they just treat it as trying to get an element of a person, and so they light it flat and they shoot the cinematography kind of like a high school stage play or something. And anything you can do to imply that like you are in an actual location, like if you have a light source hitting somebody and then you have, you know, you set up a bar to cast a shadow from that light source, then you have like a CG bar that you put in there so it looks like the CG bar is casting that stuff actually goes a really long way in making everything gel. This shot made me realize I don't want to optimize my photo scans quite as much. Like you can really easily see all of the polygons, and that's because I want it to run really good on people's laptops if I use it as, you know, shared as an asset or something, and they're kind of designed to be background elements, but I keep running into situations where I can't get too close to the model because it starts to fall apart, whereas I don't really run into situations where, you know, I have too many polygons so everything starts to chug. So I think it might be nice to kind of skew in a direction where these, you know, where my models are just a little bit more high poly and they can hold up to close-ups without me having to rely on a shallow depth of field to hide, you know, the lack of geometry quite as much. This shot is actually 2 shots in one. You'll see it kind of glitch out in a second here. And it's actually a shot I did like 4 years ago that I'm just going back and kind of giving another pass to. In the original version, I just rendered out one still image, and this was like a hole where I slid the footage in. And in this case, I actually brought the footage in as an emissive material. So it's actually, you know, you can see him moving in the reflections and it's casting light into everything. And that just made it also a lot easier to match the lighting. Like I added a supplementary magenta and green light here in the digital scene to match the original footage, and so everything just kind of integrates better. I added some actual volumetrics and some actual camera motion. Just a little bit of camera motion means the parallax gives you a sense of depth and helps place you in the scene. Like you don't always want the camera moving like crazy, but sometimes it really does help kind of like establish a location. Honestly, I am a little embarrassed by how lackluster the storefront actual proper set is. It literally is just a white wall with a couple mannequins, but I still think it works well enough for this context. Similarly, I updated this shot, which used to just be a lot more basic. All of these lights are all using the exact same material, and they're all animated with just 2 keyframes going from off to on, and they're all randomizing when they turn on and the color and all of that. It's a bunch of stuff I went over in the animated LED reader board tutorial, just a lot of different tricks for randomization, and so I was quickly able to just really, I used to have all the lights being just kind of like a basic warm orange, and mixing it up so it's kind of more magenta and yellow and teal and stuff, I just thought made it feel more subterranean and kind of trippy and magical or whatever. By which I mean Caitlin was watching Euphoria and I was like, I want to try colors. Yeah. This shot was a lesson that you can push things too far. I'd kind of gotten used to like setting things up and it would just kind of render okay, but I actually don't particularly like this shot. It looks like a shot from like a overly stylized student film or I don't even know. But just like the oversaturation of the colors feels a little bit fake. The too shallow depth of field is a bit much. The wide angle lens is a bit much. The camera movement is a bit much. It's all a little bit oversaturated. My chunky, photo scans are a bit much. I'll probably rework this a little bit. Chromefell's moped model looks absolutely fantastic, but yeah, I did not do a very good job on this, what should be a showcase shot of showcasing it, really. I think I'll probably just pull out some of this green and more rim light it and just like let there be darker areas. It just feels a little bit flat right now. Anyways, yeah, that's what I learned from that one. Likewise, I didn't learn all that much from this shot either, except that, again, like photo scans combined with an HDRI generally give pretty realistic results if you don't, like, push them in any wacky way. Most of these buildings are from, I bought on Sketchfab a while back for the first Dynamo Dream episode. The rest is photo scans I did myself and some, like, CG textures buildings in the background. I put this shot together really, really quick, just trying to kind of cut corners, and I kind of went for like style over actual immersive realism, which is why I have this very dramatic camera motion in there. And I think I'm actually going to do like kind of camera whirring sound effects too, just kind of to make things feel, yeah, just kind of gee whiz, I guess. I don't know. I'm just trying to have it kind of be fun and a little bit manic here at the beginning. These are some photo scans of friends. I only added one of those idle animation rigs to one of them, which kind of makes it feel like they're all probably moving. In fact, I think this is just the same person probably looking at themselves like, why am I sitting frozen on a bench? The idea of a moped and radial engine sales and repair shop is inordinately funny to me. And there are like 3 radial engines scattered around in this shot. Here's one in the alley, but they're not really featured, and probably no one will read that anyways. But yeah, that's a photo scan I did of a radial engine at a museum. Honestly, this shot, more than any I've done in a long time, employed like every technique that I have to kind of like just put a thing together really fast that works. Like you can see I've got a really basic, extrude, unwrap texture thing going on for these buildings here, covered in like little cutout signs. This bike is just a font of different vehicles, and I found a bike. There's photo scans in here. There's old, here's a wireframe modifier to look like a sign. There's old neon assets and things like that. People with a little idle animation rig on there, and yeah, just seeing it all kind of come together, taking all these random techniques and dumping them into a shot and having it kind of just feel like a fairly realistic city street was very gratifying. There's actually a lot of people hidden here around on the street, but you don't see any of them because the camera's moving so quick. Anyways, and Deep Desert Radio DJ, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. This is one of those times where like it's featuring a full digital person, but it doesn't feel particularly uncanny. Like, I don't know, I'm pushing it a little bit, and I'm still gonna like animate my jaw to so it matches the dialogue that I'm recording. But yeah, it works okay. And the big reason for that is the hands. I haven't done a lot with the Rococo hand tracker, and that's because most of my photo scans don't actually get the hands very well. The hands always turn into a blob, and you never really get good fingers. And so what Nathan and I did, mostly Nathan, was create a hand rig. It's just a hand photo scan cleaned up, rigged really well on the end of a mocap rig. Okay, it was entirely Nathan. I should not get any credit for this. But then I can do my regular photo scan technique where the fingers are blobs, cut off the hands and line it up with, the new specialty hand rig, and I get the best of both worlds, where I'm able to get the finger action all clean along with the full body that I want it to do. I'm going to be sharing it as an asset and with a tutorial and all of that. This specific technique ended up actually being a lot more work than I thought it would be, and so I just want to figure that out a little bit more. Hanging plastic, again, I just actually have like a small library of hanging plastic sheets that I've made, as you can probably kind of guess, and I just stick them in there. It doesn't take me any time at all. I still want to make a tutorial about that. The hair around here, like the hair's a little bit beefy, but I love the way the translucent hair really does help catch just that rim lighting here and make it feel kind of like just not volumetric, but more dimensional. Like this is just a crab shell I scanned, and the translucency in that little hair particle system really does add add quite a bit there. I still want to add like a little curly phone cable thing going from the microphone to one of these boxes, but I'm actually having a little bit of unexpected trouble figuring out how to do that. Like, it's easy to make a curly cable, and it's easy to make, you know, like a string of vertices bounce around, but attaching the curly cable to that bouncing string of vertices, I'm a little bit lost, but I'm sure there's a way, and I think that's basically it. Yeah, the Pete episode's coming together really good. It really is fun to kind of do this collaboration with, like, my younger self, just adding this additional layer of stuff onto it. I keep going through scenes and just trimming them and tightening everything up, and I think it'll be silly, but it should be a lot of fun. We have a big shoot coming up with Josh Truax in a week and a half. Very excited about that one. That's going to be a giant green screen shoot. That's going to be, if it all works out, some of the best like digital green screen stuff I've ever done. And we've got a good camera. Andy Daprowski's lending me his nice camera so we can actually shoot it with a really good bit depth. We should get really good keys. We're going to have a lot to talk about in terms of digital green screen extensions. And also, Nathan Vegdahl has been building a crazy tool set. He keeps coming up with stuff I didn't think was possible for integrating CG into live action footage in a way where you're projecting the footage back onto the geometry and different ways of dealing with that are like, oh, that makes things a lot easier than just like treating the footage as a straight background, you know? Like, actually, it's cool. And I haven't forgotten about the Making a Shot from Scavenged Items series. I still want to do part 2 on that. I just got a little bit stuck because I was going to have another character arrive who was also going to be on a moped, but then I thought, wouldn't it be better if they were on like a Hyperbole bike? Kind of like, oh, that would be a fun tie-in. And then I found this model of like this giant crawfish or lobster or something, and the knowledge that like Nathan Vegdahl could animate like a fun walk cycle of it running, and like I kind of want to do that now, and so I just got a little bit destroyed by indecision there. But we'll wrap that up soon, and it'll be fun. We're gonna take this photo scan of Nathan and rig him up, and hopefully make him feel like he's riding on a bike. But yeah, anyways, thanks for hanging out. I will see you soon.